Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait just a second to make sure everybody gets in, gets their audio going, and then we'll get started.
Welcome, everybody.
All right, it looks like everybody has got their audio going, and so we'll go ahead and get started. You are joining the Native American Language, or we call it NAL ED 2024 Grant Competition Guidance for Prospective Applicants. Let me go ahead and play the disclaimer before we get started.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
Great. Now that we've gotten disclaimed, we're going to go through the logistics. I'm just going to hold for a second. And as we hold, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you are zooming in from. We've got a bunch of people still coming in and getting their audio on. And so I don't want them to miss the logistics of this meeting and the agenda and getting them to meet your program officer. Let's just see. Let me check. All right. Looks like everybody has their audio on. Again, if you're just joining us, you are joining the NAL or Native American Language 2024 Grant Competition Guidance for Prospective Applicants. So let's go over the logistics for today. All online participants will be muted for this session. So if you have a question or a comment, you can please put that in the chat box. While I'm going through this, we'd love for you to test out your chat and make sure it's working. Let us know where you're zooming in from. All questions will be addressed following each section of the webinar in order received. And so we will be continuously scanning the chat. And when we end each section, we'll sort of touch back and go over any questions related to that section. This webinar will be posted on the OIE website. So we do a recording and then we will post it there at that link. And we'll have some of our team members putting that link into the chat so you can access that. For any technical issues, please contact the OIE Technical Assistance Team through the chat box or by email at oie@seiservices.com. Okay, now that we've gone over the logistics, again, there's still people joining in, so I just want to remind everybody that you are on mute, but if you have a question, we welcome your questions. Please put them in the chat box. Before we get into the meat of everything, I wanted to make sure that you met your NAL ED Program Officer and Competition Manager, Dr. Donna Sabis-Burns. Hi, Donna.
It looks like Donna may have gotten knocked off momentarily.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep moving, and then Donna, when you get back on, just give me a shout out, and then you can take over again. If you can't hear me, that would be problematic. Anyways, it seems like everybody is having some weather all across from Hawaii all the way up into the East Coast. And so we're just praying that the technology stays and hangs on for everyone. I'm sure you folks are probably experiencing some weather challenges as well.
And I think Donna's re-hosted, so hopefully she's
Yes.
Great.
Oh, yes, it is a nasty weather day out there for sure. So hopefully everyone's staying safe. Yes, I am Donna Sabis-Burns. I wear, as many of us here within the office, wear multiple hats. But I'm lucky enough to be the program officer and the competition manager for this competition. And I love it. It's one of our very strong programs that we have. Today, we have a whole bunch of information to share with you. And I just want to remind everybody that the two pre-app webinars that we have today and the next one is on the 16th. It's basically, they're intended to help the applicants understand exactly what you're applying to, what the competition involves. But please understand that neither of the two webinars is a substitute for thoroughly reading that notice inviting applications and the application package on grants.gov in its entirety. Please, please, please read both of them if you haven't already with a fine-tooth comb, because that tells you everything you need to know in order to write a very good application. And if you have questions, like Alani was alluding to, please pop them in the chat. We may not be able to answer them right away, and that's okay. We will get back to you and happy to accommodate that as much as we can. So I will turn it back over to you, Alani, to go to the next slide.
Okay, so the overview for today is we will be covering first the objectives and who's joining us today. We're going to do a little poll around that. The purpose and FY24 competition overview, our priorities for the NAL at ED, the NAL at ED application requirements, the NAL at ED selection criteria, grant budget information and guidance, the application package and instructions, post-application transmittal, as well as the resources available for you to prepare your application. The objectives today are, first, we really want to learn what's in the fiscal year 2024 NAL at ED grant application package. So we're really going to dive into that. We'd like to get you to understand the application and the program requirements, the selection criteria, as well as what types of forms are required for your application, and then have an opportunity for you to submit any questions to OIE. And like Donna said, for the most part, we're going to try to answer your questions today, but if there is a question that we are unable to answer, then the Office of Indian Education, or OIE, will be getting back to you with that response. I just want to take a pause and just sort of welcome everybody. There was a whole bunch of people that just joined us. And so welcome to the NAL at ED, or Native American Language pre-application webinar. So we're going to put up a poll. We're going to go through a couple of questions. And the first question is, how did you learn about this competition? And let's go ahead and see if we can't get that poll launched. There we go. Thank you. So again, that first question, there are some entities that you can select that best identify your organization. And I see some of you folks are so super on it. You're moving to the second question, which is, how did you learn about this competition? Awesome. Give a couple more seconds for everybody to complete that. Alrighty. If you can't see the second question, try to maybe see if you can scroll down through that poll, and it should be towards the bottom of it. Okay, if the poll looks like we're having some difficulties with the poll, if the poll disappeared, if you could put in the chat how you heard or learned about this competition. Here is your, on the screen are sort of the ways in which you may have heard about this competition. We have either the OIE website, our OIE listserv, the Department of Education grants forecast, or the Federal Register. Maybe you heard from a current NAL ED grantee, or maybe you are a current NAL ED grantee, or maybe there's another way that you heard. Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. And thank you for letting us know. Awesome. Okay, looks like we've got most people that completed the survey, and I see also many of you are putting your information in the chat. Really appreciate that. Okay. Awesome. A new grant portal, great. Again, if you're just joining us now, our question is, how did you learn about this competition? There should be a poll up on your screen. And the first question was really, what eligible entity do you represent? And so you can go ahead and complete that poll. As you're completing that poll, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this webinar represents a portion of the required information available about the grant competition. It is not 100% comprehensive. And so like Donna said earlier, you really want to make sure that you are diving into that notice inviting applications, as well as the application package, and really sort of combing through that information, because that is really 100% of the information that you will need. Remember to follow the instructions on your grants.gov and the registration process, such as your UEI and SAM number. That is something you probably want to do maybe after you get off this call. If you have any questions in your mind related to your either your UEI, your SAM, or your grants.gov eligibility or registration.
Okay, great. I will take over this next section. Thank you, Alani.
Sure.
We are going to be popping into the purpose, the eligibility, and the funding overview in this next section. So the purposes of, oh, and let me say too, that you may find us repeating ourselves on a couple of things. If we do, there's a couple reasons. One, we know people come in and out at different times, and we really want to emphasize some of this information, or it's really, 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 really important. So we're going to say it as often as we can, repetition, right? And to try to get it as clear as possible so you have the best information you have moving forward. All right, so the purposes of the Native American Language Program at ED within OIE is to support the schools that use Native American and Alaska Native languages as the primary language of instruction. We aim to maintain, protect, and promote the rights and freedom of Native Americans and Alaska Natives to use, practice, maintain, and revitalize the languages as envisioned by the NALA, or the Native American Language Act of 1990. And also we want to support the nation's First Peoples' efforts to maintain and revitalize their languages and cultures, and to improve that educational opportunities and overall student outcomes within Native American and Alaska Native communities. Those who are eligible, we have a big list here. So eligible entities for this program include an Indian tribe. And you can look at the NIA, the NOFO, and you can see definitions for these. So if you're not quite sure, have that notice inviting applications handy so you can take a look at those definitions. It's an Indian tribe, a tribal college or university, TCU. You can have a tribal education agency, TEA, a local education agency, LEA, and that does include public charter schools under the state law. a school operated by the Bureau of Indian Education, an Alaska Native Regional Corporation, as described in the Native Alaska Claims Settlement Act, a private, tribal, or Alaska Native nonprofit organization, and a non-tribal for-profit organization. Next slide. And looking at the funding picture here, we have approximately $2.4 million to hand out for these grants. The estimated range, we would say anywhere between 300 and 400,000 per year. And so that's not total. Some people misunderstand that. It's just what's forecasted per year. And this is up to 36 months. So this is a 3-year grant, and we're looking at an average around $350,000 per year for those 3 years. So if you add that all up, it's about 4 programs. Of course, it all depends on how much funding is requested and approved and recommended. However, it's looking to be about 4 grants. So it's pretty competitive this year. The intent to apply is on January 17th, 2024, and of which I've received many so far. Thank you very much for submitting those. And application deadline is March 7th of 2024. And this is the very, very first time that OIE has ever offered a 100-day writing period for a grant competition. And our director, Julian Guerrero, who is, I think, on here as well, fought really hard to get this stated. And we are very proud and happy to be able to give you time to write a quality application, and hoping that extra time is helpful to you. Next slide. And I mentioned the notice of intent to apply. It doesn't mean it's required, okay? Applicants, you want to submit a notice to apply, you can do this by simply sending me an email. And my email will be listed throughout, in the very beginning and the end, and it's on the notice. You can find it all over the place. The notice of intent, it's simply just providing us who is going to be the lead entity, if you know who your partners may be, and if you're going to do a consortium, please feel free to include it. It's not going to count for or against you. It's just information that we use to help plan. We also ask that you let us know which language you are intending to include in your proposal. We ask for notices of intent just to help prepare for the peer review when we do that, and how many panel reviewers we need to recruit and so forth. And so please, if you don't get to do the intent, it does not mean you cannot apply. Please remember that. It's just for planning purposes. And if you do send me an intent and then things happen where you can't, don't worry, nothing's going to happen. There's no marks against you. It's simply just for information. Okay, next slide. Now, we have a couple of program requirements that the department must follow with this particular program. And one is the diversity of languages. And we want to make sure that a diversity of languages as required by our statute. And the department will not fund more than one project in any competition year that proposes to use the same Native American Alaska Native language, assuming there are enough high quality applications. In the event of a lack of high quality applications in one competition year, the department may choose to fund more than one within the same language at that time. So we like to look for diversity. And so if we happen to have 2 very high scoring, let's say applications for, just an example, Navajo language, and there's 2 high scoring applications, we take the highest score, and if for that one Navajo, and in the event that we just don't have a lot, then we do take a look at that and go with either a tiebreaker, or we can go with someone to choose to fund more than one project if that's the case. Okay, so that's why also, if you do send that intent and include the language, that helps us with planning too, just to have an idea if we're going to be having a lot of one language in particularly, but that's what's in the statute. and also a geographic distribution. So we're looking at geographic diversity, assuming we have high quality applications, which I know after today we're going to, right? The department will not exclusively fund projects that all purpose, propose to serve students in the same state. Of course, we want that diversity across geographic regions as well. Okay, next slide. Here is just a map so we can show you where our current grantees are located from our competitions from 2022 and 2023. And as you can see, we do have a pretty wide representation from many different regions around the country. Okay, next is very, very important too. We're going to talk about the priorities. These have two absolute priorities and two competitive preference priorities. And you'll probably hear this a couple of times, that applicants must choose either AP 1 or absolute priority 2. Can do both in the same application. Okay, to dive a little deeper into absolute priority 1, and that is to develop and maintain new Native American language programs. And in order to meet this priority, an applicant must propose to develop and maintain a Native American language instructional program. And within that program, you will look to support the Native American language education and development for Native American students, as well as provide that professional development for teachers and, as appropriate, staff and administrators to look at strengthening the overall language and academic goals of the school or schools that will be served by this project. And it will take place in a school, and it does not augment or replace a program of identical scope that was active in the last 3 years of the schools to be served. And as an applicant, you must clearly identify the specific absolute priority that the proposed project addresses in that abstract, and we'll get into that just a little bit further. And then we have, AP 1, and this is AP 2, to expand and improve an existing Native American language program. So looking at this particular AP, you're looking at proposing to improve and expand Native American language instructional program that looks at, again, improving and expanding the Native American language education and development, same as AP 1, also to provide that professional development and to strengthen the overall language and academic goals of the school or schools that will be served. Again, it will be take place in a school, and will also be within the last 3 years, has been offered at the school to be served. So those are the parameters of AP 1 and AP 2. And one thing to remember, if you are interested, if you happen to be, let's say, in a consortium and you are interested in both AP 1 and AP 2, please do not put that in your one proposal. You have to submit a proposal that either has it written towards AP 1 or written towards AP 2. One year we did have an application that incorporated both, and unfortunately was deemed ineligible because if you can and have the capacity to do both, they must be presented in 2 separate applications. Okay. So if you're taking a look, here's just a couple of examples. Here's an example 1. Let's say an applicant is proposing a brand new Native Navajo language program for 8th graders in a school that had no language program for any students for the last 10, 11 years. They would apply under AP 1 because it's over that 3-year threshold. Example 2, an applicant proposing a new Navajo language for 5th graders at a school where Navajo language program currently exists for 1st through 4th graders. That would be an example where they would apply for AP 2. Now, like I said, we also have 2 competitive preference priorities. And the competitive preference priorities are not required. It's just if you have the capacity to respond to them within your application, it could give you some extra points if the application is being peer reviewed. And for FY24 and any subsequent year in which we make awards from the list of unfunded applications from this competition, these priorities will be considered the competitive preference priorities. And we will award an additional 7 points to an application, depending on how well an application meets CPP. We love our acronym, CPP1. And we award an additional 5 points to an application that meets CPP2. So for this competition, you could actually get a total max number of CPP points to be 12. And as we walk through many parts of the application and program requirements, such as these, we'll try to make effort to highlight how and where those eligible entities should address these priorities within the applications. So we'll mention that as we move along. Okay, so looking at CPP1, this one is specifically, and this is up to 7 points, support project sustainability with Title VI Indian Education Formula Grant funds. So in order to meet this priority, an applicant or partner in the consortium must receive or be eligible to receive a formula grant under the Title VI of the ESEA Elementary Secondary Education Act of 65 as amended, and must commit to use either all or part of that formula grant funds to help sustain the project after the conclusion of the grant period. So in order to meet this priority, an applicant must include a statement that indicates the school year in which the entity will begin using Title VI formula funds to support that project. And next slide. We'll also list the percentage of that Formula 6 or the Title VI grant that will be used for the project. So you'll see that the points are incremental. If you can use 20% of your Title VI formula funds, that's 3, 40% 4, 60% 5, 80% 6 points, or if you intend to use all of your Title VI formula funds for this particular project, that would be a full 7 points. And you also have to provide us with a timeline for obtaining parent committee input and approval of this action as the formula grant program requires. Applicants who request points under CPP1, you will see this form in the application package when you go to complete it. Please, you need to complete it in its entirety. So it's very clear what your intentions are. So you'll see this. We want to just highlight that to make sure you are looking for this in the application package under CPP1. Make sure you complete this form. Okay, so that was CPP1. CPP2, you can get up to 5 points. If your preference, if you were an Indian applicant and you can meet that preference requirement, option. To meet this priority, an application must be submitted either by one of those eligible entities that we talked about, such as the Tribal Indian Tribe, Indian Organization, Bureau of Indian Education funded school, a TCU that is eligible to participate. So if one of them are leading the project, then you can claim Indian preference priority points. And a consortium of the eligible entities that meets the requirement of the CFR, which is our federal the rules that compile this program, includes an Indian tribe, Indian organization, and the BIE funded school or TCU will be considered eligible. So you can apply on your own or in a consortium with other of the eligible folks. However, to meet this CPP2, you have to be one of those as lead applicant. In order to be considered a consortium, there are some varying pieces of important information you need to keep in mind. The application must include the consortium agreement, and it must be signed by all parties. And we're going to note here that a consortium agreement, it must state that the members designate one member of the group to apply for the grant as the lead applicant. You're going to detail the activities that each member of the group plans to perform, and you bind each member to the group to every statement and assurance made by the applicant within the application. And we reference this so you can take a look at if you really want to know the ins and outs of consortium agreement requirements. We reference that for you, but very, very important to keep in mind that these consortium agreements must be signed and signed within 4 months, in the last 4 months. Something in 2019 will not qualify. So this has to be signed within the 4 months prior. So looking at a glance, looking at the priorities. So when we talked about AP1, and that's to develop and maintain a brand new native language program. This is required. All applicants are required to select, like we said, either AP1 or AP2, not both. And you will need to put these in the abstract and throughout the narrative. So we should be able to read that abstract and know exactly what AP priority you're applying to. Same thing with AP2. Be found in the abstract and the narrative as well. Now, as far as the CPP1, which is optional, this should also be listed in your abstract and part 6. And we'll get there later on in the presentation with the form, as well as CPP2. It's optional, and that should be placed in the abstract so we can see very clearly and quickly what the intent is. And Alani, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. We're ready to move into the next session, but before we do, there are a bunch of questions in the chat that I wanted to go through. A bunch of them are questions regarding eligibility. And so I'll just go through the list of different eligibility questions. One is really looking at our Head Start or Early Head Start programs eligible.
Okay, I need to find and see. Can you say that again, please, Alani?
Our Head Start or Early Head Start programs eligible.
Let me see here.
Another one kind of connected is around language nest. Are they eligible?
Hang on just a second. I'm referencing this.
Okay.
While Donna's getting that reference for everyone, I just want to say aloud something that's been mentioned a couple of times in the chat, and that's in regards to the recording of this session and the slide deck. We will make this slide deck available as well as the recording of this session on the OIE website. Barring any technological difficulties, it will be up at the latest by Friday. The link directly to the OIE website, if you don't have that, is currently in the chat, so you can mark that down. We do not send an email out to all participants when the recording goes up on the website, so you will need to check back. But like I said, it should be up by Friday at the latest. So that's the slide deck and the recording of this session.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. So I have a member of our general counsel in the background who's also helping me answer some of the technical questions. And we're going to copy and paste the eligible entities again. And if Head Start is listed on there, then that is your answer. So I'm going to see if I can copy and paste this so everyone in the meeting.
If you'd like, I can copy and paste it in.
I think I got it. Thanks. But yeah, that if you don't see Head Start on there, then that's your answer.
Great. Okay, there was another question about, again, thank you for putting, Sarah, for putting the eligible entities into the chat. There was another question about BIE schools. Let me see, I lost that question. Here it is. BIE schools, whether they're eligible or not, or can they be tribally controlled schools? Do those schools qualify?
A school operated by the Bureau of Indian Education is considered an eligible entity.
Right?
Now, important one thing to talk about Head Start, it will not be listed on its own, just letting you know. So if you're looking at the Head Start, it will not be listed. Yeah.
Also, there was a question about whether or not you could tell them how many unfunded applications there were in the past. This is a multiple question, so I'll go with that one. Can you tell, Donna, can you tell, or is there a place where they can find information regarding unfunded applications from the past?
We used to have that information on our webpage. I just don't know if it's updated. I have to look and see. If we ended up funding what we call funding down the slate for FY23, and we're able to add 4 additional grantees. But I think it's been updated for that since that 2022 competition. I'll have to check, and I'm making myself a note that it'll take just a little bit of research. It won't take long, but I don't have that number on the top of my head. So I will take a look at unfunded apps and get that up there as soon as I can. How's that?
Yeah, that works. The next question, sort of in the same vein, is how does that process work for current applicants and unfunded applicants in the past?
So if you are a current grantee with OIE for a NAL grant, you can submit an application as long as it's to, AP1 or AP2, and you're not doing is of course the same program that you're already currently doing, right? And so if you have applied and were not successful in your application, you can apply as many times as you want to. And so does that answer the question?
Well, I hope it does. If not, please put another clarifying comment in the chat and then we'll circle back. Also, they further went on to say, will reviewing the grant applications and funding be strictly based on points and what you mentioned earlier about geography and language diversity?
So we will get into the selection criteria that's required for this competition, and what points are associated. And yes, it is a peer review competitive process. And so for those of you who may not know, what we do is we screen for eligibility when we get all the applications in, and those that are eligible go on to be read by a panel of experts, and they read and then they score the points according to the selection criteria that is written in the NOFO, and then CPP points, if you are including any of the competitive preference points, that is then added once it's been verified, and then those scores are ranked, and then we take the top, in this case, 4 applications we think, maybe 4 or 5 depending on the budget, and take those top scoring applications, and those who will be considered the successful grantees for FY24. So the selection criteria, it's based on how well you write to the selection criteria, right? And that will share those points, and the points are also listed in the notice inviting applications.
Great clarification. Thank you. And so here's another qualifying question or eligibility question. Does a BIE school operated by a tribal organization under PL 100-297 qualify?
I have to look what PL 2197 is first, but if you can have a consortium with entities as long as the lead applicant is one of those eligible entities that we posted.
Okay. Another, does BIE operated pertain to BIE funded They just wanted a clarification between bureau-operated schools versus tribally controlled schools.
Lindsay, do you know if that's a difference between operated or funded? Okay, go to the next one. She's responding to me.
Okay, okay. And then there was a question asking for what is meant by tribal education agency, and I see that Casey provided some clarification and definition of that.
Good.
Um, let's see.
So the answer, the tribally controlled, but BIE funded schools, they likely qualify under another category of eligible entity, right? The tribally controlled, but BIE funded schools are they're likely to qualify, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's clear.
And so this is again clarifying a previous question around the language nest. So the distinction here is that for their organization, they work with a Native American owned nonprofit. The language used is that the language programs need to be in a school. We meet the application eligibility as a nonprofit. Will OIE recognize a language nest as a school?
If you are one of the eligible entities allowed to apply for this grant, you can be in a consortium with somebody who is serving as a language nest within a school, as long as that within a school is their language nest. I don't see why that would be an issue, but that's actually a great question, and I will follow up. We will again have another one next Tuesday. It's exact same information, but if I can follow up on that one, I'd like to. And I'm very, if you can't tell, I'm very leery with eligibility questions because I don't want to head you off in the wrong direction for any reason. And so if there's something that I'm just not quite sure of, I do want to do a little research and can follow up with the person who asked the question. Just
Right. Great. So can an awarded TCU initiate a native language program at Head Start and early childhood learning?
Well, TCU would be eligible to apply. Content, would it be Head Start content?
Yeah, I think what most of these Head Start and Language Nest ones are specifically looking at is the grade level requirement
Right.
and whether that preschool. So it may need to be one of the follow-up questions next.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know as far as eligibility goes, if it's not in that list, but for content, I was thinking the same thing, Sarah. So yeah, anything that has to do with Head Start, grade level content, so forth, we'll have to get back to you. These
Okay,
are great questions.
yeah. I'm just scrolling through. Can award TCU? Okay, that's another Head Start and early language question that Donna will get back to. I think that's it on the eligibility. Just one more scroll through.
And Sarah, would you guys please, I'm sure you will compile all those questions together for me. I know you probably were planning on doing that, but just in case.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll send a follow-up email and similar early learning programs about that. We'll get it to you.
Awesome. So let's move forward. I'm sure you folks have been looking at this screen for a little bit. The next section, we are going to be going through the general requirements, the memorandum of agreement, application engagement with Indian tribes and tribal organizations, as well as certification. Okay, so all applicants are required to complete the general requirements form available in part 6 of the application. And so that is what this looks like. You can see all this information here. So again, you want to make sure that you are completing that section. Many applicant requirements are addressed by completing provided forms and adding attachments to the application package, specifically in part 6 of other attachments. So you want to make sure you're looking at that. Also, you have this general requirements. So again, the application information for NAL ED program attachment with assurances. So this is, you know, the assurances that you will be making. Again, that is a document that you will add as part of your application. So the application requirements, the general requirements, again, you want to make sure that you meet these general requirements. You must complete the form titled Attachment Applicant Information for NAL ED Program Assurances. That is available in part 6 of the application package. The information form requires you to provide the following information: instructional language, the name of the Native American or Alaska Native language to be used for instruction at the school or schools supported by the eligible entity. Also, you want to make sure you are including the number of students to be served by the project and their grade levels of targeted students in the proposed project. More information that's required include the instructional hours. So the number of hours of instruction per week in and through one or more of the Native American, or Alaska Native languages currently being provided to targeted students at any such school or schools. Also, you want to share whether a pre and a post assessment of Native American language proficiency is available, and if not, the percentage of grant funds that will be used in developing this assessment. So if there's not an existing assessment, what percentage of grant funds will be used to create that assessment? And then also a program description. This should be a description of how the eligible entity will support Native American language education and development and provide professional development for staff in order to really strengthen the overall language and academic goals of the school or schools that will be served by the project. You want to make sure that includes that you're ensuring that the implementation of a rigorous academic content that prepares all students for college and career and ensure that the students progress towards meeting high-level fluency goals in the Native American language. Other information that you'll need to provide is your organizational information. For each school included in the project, you want to make sure you're providing information regarding the school's organizational governance or affiliations, specifically information about the school's governing entities, such as a local educational agency or LEA, a tribal education agency or TA or a department. Maybe you're under a charter organization, or maybe even a private, maybe you're a private school, your private organization, and or any other governing entity. The school's accreditation status, any partnerships with the institutions of higher education, and any Indigenous language schooling and research cooperatives. Additionally, the applicants, you shouldn't be including these assurances, stumbling over my words. The authorizing representative for the applicant must sign the form provided in part 6. So if you know, many of us have grant writers who are completing grant applications, and maybe even a program director or a program coordinator who's involved in that. You want to make sure that the authorized representative is signing the application, not the grant writer, not a program director or coordinator, unless they are the authorized representative. You want to make sure that you're including for each school the school that is engaged in meeting the state or tribal designated long-term goals for students, as may be required by applicable federal, state, or tribal law, that the school provides assessments of students using the Native American or Alaska Native language of instruction where possible, that the qualifications of all instructional and leadership personnel at such school are sufficient to deliver high-quality education through the Native American or Alaska Native language used in the school, as well as the school will collect and report to the public data relative to student achievement and, if appropriate, rates of high school graduation, career readiness, and enrollment in post-secondary education or workforce development programs of students who are enrolled in the school's programs. An applicant that proposes to work with a partner to carry out the proposed project must include a signed and dated memorandum of agreement. And so we're going to dig a little bit into what that means. I really want to underscore the importance of a non-LEA entity having an MOA that would require the district or BIE school to share their data for grant reporting purposes. And so again, if you are getting your data from a larger, maybe, maybe higher up the chain in your organization, so particularly like a BIE or maybe even an LEA or a school district, you want to make sure that you have an MOA that details your data sharing agreement and information. You want to make sure that that MOA provides a description of how each partner will implement the project according to the timelines described in your grant application. You want to make sure that that MOA includes the roles and responsibilities of each partner. So not just yourself, but also any of your partners that are participating. You want to make sure that that information is related to ensuring that the data necessary to report on the Government Performance and Results Act, or we call them for short GEPR, and you're going to be hearing that a bunch later on, indicators. So how everyone is going to be sharing that data to be able to report it, as well as the roles and responsibilities of each partner related to ensuring that Native American language instructors can be recruited, retained, and trained as appropriate in a timely manner. This memorandum of agreement must be signed within 4 months prior to the application deadline. I know a lot of times we have maybe MOAs that are long-standing, or maybe we're using another MOA from another grant. You want to make sure you're checking that date. So you're submitting an MOA from December 2019, that will not meet this requirement, for example. And so check your MOA dates and make sure that they are signed within 4 months prior to, and what the key language is, the application deadline. So check that information. Another requirement is that your application engagement with Indian tribes and tribal organizations. And this is specifically for non-tribal applicants. So all non-tribal applicants must engage with appropriate officials from the tribe or tribes located in the area served by the project, or with a local tribal organization prior to submission of an application. So the engagement must provide for the opportunity for officials from the tribes or tribal organizations to meaningfully and substantively contribute to the application. This should really be at the forefront of your planning and writing your grant. Non-tribal applicants must submit evidence of either tribal engagement or a letter of support from one or more tribes or tribal organizations. This evidence can be a part of your memorandum of agreement required by the application requirement number 2, or can be uploaded as a separate attachment. If an applicant is an affected LEA that is subject to ESEA section 8538, then the LEA is required to consult with appropriate officials from tribe or tribes or tribal organizations approved by the tribes located in the area served by the LEA prior to its submission of an application on the contents of the application as required under ESEA Section 8538. So affected LEAs are those that have 50% or more of their student enrollment made up of Native American students or received an Indian Education Formula Grant under Title VI of the ESEA in the previous fiscal year, that exceeds $40,000. And so again, if you're an LEA, you want to check all of these things, check to see if you are serving 50% or more of your students that are Native American in your enrollment, or that you're receiving an Indian Education Formula Grant under Title VI of the ESEA in the previous fiscal year. That, again, this is key, exceeds $40,000. Okay, another requirement is your tribal certification. And so this certification is when an applicant that is an LEA, including a public charter school that is an LEA under state law, a school operated by the BIE, or a non-tribal for-profit or non-profit organization, you must submit a certification from an entity described in the application requirement for A, containing the assurances described in application requirement 4B. What does this all mean? The certification must be from one of the following entities: one whose land the school or program is located, or that is an entity served by the school, or whose members, as defined by the entity, are served by the school. So this can include a federally recognized Indian tribe or tribal organization, a tribal college or university, a TCU, an Alaska Native Regional Corporation or Alaska Native Nonprofit Organization, or a Native Hawaiian organization. The tribal requirements the tribal certification must state that the school or applicant organization has the capacity to provide education primarily through a Native American or Alaska Native language, and that there are sufficient speakers of that target language at the school or available to be hired by the school or applicant. This is what that attachment looks like. And so basically, you will be going through and checking off the appropriate descriptors for your organization. All right. So that was a whole bunch. We're going to take a pause and I'm going to check the chat to see what questions we may have. I see some of them are being answered already. Awesome. Looks like they were all answered in the chat.
I think they are. I think they have been.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Lonnie.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next is about program requirements. So program requirements, of course, are very different than application requirements because they specifically outline what needs to be done rather than what we need to see in your application, right? So we really encourage you to keep these requirements in your, in mind as you're designing or developing your program and as you work on your application. So looking at program requirements for the FY24 in any subsequent year in which we make the awards from the list of unfunded applications from this competition, grantees must adhere to these program requirements. And the first one is the Native American Language Proficiency Assessment. So they must grantees must administer a pre and post assessment of the Native American language proficiency to the participating students. And this assessment may be any relevant tool that measures student Native American language proficiency, and that can include oral, written, or project-based assessments, as well as formative and summative assessments. And types of assessments, for example, you can have conversational assessment with proficient educators or assessors. You can have conversational and question-based assessments with an elder, let's say. An online multiple choice and spoken assessment, an online assessment where student records their verbal responses to and written and or audio prompts. And so there's a myriad of different assessments that have been used to document this information and this data. And the means of determined proficiency, the grade and or age level appropriate proficiency, and the same scale is used for everybody, including the adults. For example, the adapted version of the ACT-FL scale. So those are just a couple of examples of some assessments. It's not all standardized assessments for language out there. There are different ways that you can provide that information. The next requirement is looking at the ISDEAA hiring preference, and that awards that are primarily for the benefit of Indians, and they're subject to the provisions of Section B of that Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. And this section requires, to the fullest extent possible, that the grantee give preference and opportunities for training and employment in connection with the administrative of the awards to Native Americans, and also give to an Indian organization and the Indian-owned economic enterprises referenced in the Indian Financing Act, preference in the award of contracts, for example, in connection with the administration of the grant. So for purposes of this section, an Indian is a member of any federally recognized Indian tribe. And so that's a program requirement. And then we have the GEPRA measures, which is the Government Performance Result Act. And these are measures that indicate success for the program. Their applicant are advised to carefully consider these measures in conceptualizing the approach and evaluation for their proposed project. The grantee will be required to provide every year in their annual performance report and after the grant finishes about the progress in meeting these measures. Every successful application that's funded with the NAL program goes under these NAL specific measures. And those don't change. Program objectives and goals can change obviously per project, but the program GEPRA goals do not. And these are, the next slide will show, there's 4 of them for this program. And the first one is looking at the number and percentage of participating students that attain proficiency in a native language through pre and post session assessments of their native language proficiency assessment. And then number 2 is the number and percentage of participating students who make progress in learning as determined by the grantee through pre and post. So the first one is attain proficiency, and then the second one is how many have make progress with their assessments in their native language proficiency. Measure 3, the number and percentage of participating students who show an improvement in academic outcomes as measured by those academic assessments or other indicators that you outline in your application. And then measure 4 is the difference between average daily attendance of the participating students and versus the average daily attendance of all students in a comparison group. So those are the 4 measures that will have to be reported out every year with this particular program. Now, some of you are asking about the content of and how they're scored. And so this next section is about the selection criteria. And there are 5 sections of this. I've seen a lot more. And so with this, there's 5. One is the quality of the project design, the project services. We're going to talk about project personnel, the adequacy of the resources, and the quality of a management plan. So when we're looking at the quality of the project design, this is a whopper. This is worth 32 out of 100 points, okay? And there are 5 components to this. When you write to your application and you write to the selection criteria, you want to make sure that you are addressing each and every one of the sub-criteria that's listed here in the breakdown. Don't skip any, because you'll get, if it's missing, you will not get the points for that particular section. So you have 32 points in total for the project design, 5 sub-criteria with the designated points associated. So the first one, you're looking at the goals, the extent to which the goals, objectives, and the outcomes are clearly specified and measurable. The peer reviewers will look at this and see and take a look at how you propose your measurements and your, the SMART. Are they SMART? And now I say that and I can't think of the life of me what it stands for. The oh, Lonnie, help me out. Measurable, attainable, the time.
Specific, measurable,
Yes, specific.
achievable, realistic, and time
Thank
bound.
you. So make sure they're SMART. Number 2, and that's for 9 points. So that's a nice little chunk there. And so the extent to which the project design will ensure that students progress towards grade level and developmentally appropriate fluency in the native language. You want to demonstrate that, and that's 6 points. The extent to which the project will incorporate parent engagement and participation in Native American language instruction. That's 6 points. And you're looking at developing and administrating pre and post assessments of their Native American language proficiency, and that can be including consultation with individuals with assessment expertise as needed, and that is for 6 points. And the extent to which the performance feedback and continuous improvement are integral to the design. So you want to explain that as well for up to 5 points. So that's the project design. This is another big one, the quality of project services. And again, these have 5 sub-criteria as well. And the first one, strategies of ensuring equal access and treatment for eligible project participants who are members of groups that have been traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. And that is 1 point. The quality of the plan for supporting grade level and developmentally appropriate instruction to the Native American language by providing instruction of or through that native language. And that is a big one. That's 11 points for that. The extent to which the project will provide professional development for teachers and as appropriate, the staff and administrators. And this is used to help strengthen that overall language proficiency and help meet those academic goals served by the project. And this can also include cultural competence training for all the staff as well. So that's 10 points. The fourth one, you're taking a look at services to be provided by the proposed project involve the collaboration of appropriate partners for maximizing the effectiveness of the project services, and the extent to which the percentage of the school day that instruction will be provided in the Native American language is ambitious and is reasonable for that particular grade level and population to be served. So that's 3 points. The third one, selection criteria, is the quality of the project personnel. And this is worth 16 points, and there are only 3 sub-criteria for that one. And we're taking a look at how well the applicant encourages applications from employment from persons who are members of groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. Yes, and so that's for 1 point. The second one is taking a look at which teachers of the Native American language were identified as staff have the appropriate teaching experience and are fluent enough in the Native American language to be taught. So that should be demonstrated for 9 points. The qualifications, including relevant training and experience of key project personnel, and that can be up to 6 points. And we'll get to the part with you can provide some other attachments to provide resumes that can demonstrate some of this. So that can help support this specific criteria. And then the next one is the adequacy of resources. And there are only 2 sub-criteria for this. So you're looking at the costs. Are they reasonable and related to your objectives? Are they reasonable to the design? And are they, the potential significance of the proposed project? Make sure you're taking a look at your costing out things. If you're traveling, if you have supplies and you're costing out, and we look at budgets and we look to see, is this reasonable? And does it follow the uniform guidance? And those are worth 6 points. and also looking at the potential for continued support of the project after federal funding. And so looking specifically at sustainability after the grant is done, and what efforts would be included in your application for that. And that is 4 points. Then the last one is the quality of the management plan for a total of 13 points. So the 2 sub-criteria look at the adequacy of the management plan to achieve the objectives listed in the project on time and within budget. So we're looking at clearly defined responsibilities. Do the timelines make sense? The milestones towards accomplishing tasks are within the time frame that's allowable for the project. And that's 8 points. And then also for the time commitments for the project director and principal investigator and any other key personnel. Do we have people who will be giving enough attention to this grant if funded over the 3 years? And are they appropriate and adequate to meet those objectives as well?
Right.
So those are the selection criteria, the meat of what you need to write to all of those sub-criteria. Don't forget.
Yeah. Okay, we do have a couple of questions that I want to address. I'll throw out to you, Donna. The first one is, should we include funds in the budget for project team members to attend an annual meeting?
So if you look in the NIA or the NOFO, you will see specifically funding must be set aside for a project directors meeting in Washington, D.C. And because of COVID, we had to start doing them virtually. However, this year's project directors meeting will be the last virtual one, and we will be doing those in person again the next fiscal year. So this year will be for a virtual. However, for our brand new grantees, we do offer something called a Grants Leadership Academy, where we have you use your grant funds and bring you to Washington, D.C., and we will give you 2 days of fun-filled technical assistance activities to get you started off on the right foot. And so it's a great question, Andy. Put aside those funds. It's part of the NOFO anyway. And then the following year after that, you'll be able to attend the project directors meeting annually using grant funds as well.
Awesome. And then the next question is, if an instructor is fluent in native language, but needs training to teach preschool children, can the grant money be used for that specific training?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that the instruction is adequate for the age group, right? So what would the students be doing in the time frame that the instructor would be getting training? Just kind of keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the next question, if the language is endangered and we have educators who are speakers, not necessarily fluent, can we use a stipend to support native elder speakers in the classroom?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. That's all the questions. And we're gonna, interestingly enough, that was a whole bunch of budget questions. We're moving straight into the budget. In this section, we're gonna cover Form ED 524 to discuss what's required as part of the budget narrative, provide some indirect cost information, as well as information regarding an administrative cap requirements. Alrighty, so I'm sorry. Budget Form ED 524. You want to make sure that you're utilizing this form, both Section A and Section B, which includes non-federal funds that are optional. Remember that you must provide all requested budget information for each of the 3 years of the project, so up to 36 months, and the total column in order to be considered for federal funding. You want to make sure you're following the specific instructions for completing the budget forms that are provided within the application package. Again, just another great reason to really comb through your the instructions. For part 5, that's your budget narrative. It serves as section C of ED Form 524. you want to make sure that it is complete and itemized budget breakdown and narrative for each year of the proposed project, so up to 36 months. You want to make sure that you are reviewing and editing to make sure that all your total funding is listed and everything adds up, that the narrative matches the total amounts that you are putting into your Form ED 524. You also want to identify the nature and amount of the proposed expenditures. It's really tempting to go back and want to make last minute line item category adjustments as you are working on your grant application. You really want to make sure that you get alignment between sort of your 524 budget form and the narrative. You want to make sure that you maybe have somebody to review it to make sure that the numbers are all the same, that you are putting that whatever is reflected in the 524 is what is being communicated through the narrative. For a grant application that scores within the funding range, these unexplained discrepancies that may come about by not checking your budget and budget narrative may result in budget reductions by the department. So again, make sure that you are editing and going back and forth to get alignment between both your budget form and your narrative. Your indirect cost information. And so there's going to be a link that is going to be put in your chat regarding more regarding FAQs around indirect cost rate. If you are requesting a reimbursement for indirect cost rate, this information is to be completed by your business office. You need to make sure that you indicate the applicant's approved indirect cost rate per the sections that are listed there in the EDGAR. If the applicant does not have an approved indirect cost rate agreement with a cognizant federal agency, the applicant must apply to the Department of Education for a temporary indirect cost rate if it wishes to charge indirect costs to the grant. For more information, you can go to the department's website, and there is the link. Thanks, Casey, for throwing that in the chat. You may also contact this phone number, and we'll put that in the chat as well for additional information regarding calculating your indirect cost rates or your general indirect cost rate information. Utilize those resources. They are very helpful. Here is a administrative cost cap. So what does that mean? So under the ESEA section 6133G, no more than 5% of awards of funds awarded for a grant under this program may be used for administrative purposes. This administrative cost cap applies only to direct administrative costs, not indirect costs. So if you already have an indirect cost rate that's been approved, you can utilize that indirect cost rate. If you do not, then you need to make sure that your administrative costs do not exceed 5% of the total awards that you're requested to be funded. So what can be included in your, what should be included in your administrative cost cap or that are direct administrative costs? So any of the overall program management, program coordination, and office management functions, including the salaries and related costs of the executive director, project director, and/or project evaluator. Preparing program plans, budget schedules, and related amendments, monitoring of programs, projects, subrecipients, and related systems and processes, developing systems and procedures, including the management information systems for assuring compliance with the program requirements, even preparing reports and other documents related to program requirements, and any divisional level administrative services such as program-specific accounting, auditing, or legal activities. These are all considered direct administrative costs and fall under that 5% cap, administrative cost cap. So let's look at some cost types and examples to see which one is considered a program cost versus a direct cost versus indirect cost. And so you can see that top row, time that project director takes to complete personnel evaluations, that would be considered a direct administrative cost. When we look at the next line, time that project director takes to facilitate a professional development session or native language in project scope, as part of the project scope, that is considered a program cost. Cost for renting tribes community space for elder and student event, that is considered a direct administrative cost. Financial accounting activities, if you have an indirect cost rate, that should be considered under the indirect cost rate. Time that project director takes to develop draft, complete annual performance report or other program requirement, that is considered a direct administrative cost. And cost for goods and services required for administration of the program, which includes rental or purchase of equipment, utilities, office supplies, postage, and rental and maintenance of office space, which are non-labor costs. This would be most likely fall under your indirect cost per rate. Okay, I'm gonna just check. Got a lot of questions about, again, the recording, that's all answered. Okay, looks like we have all of our questions answered already in the chat. So we can move on to the next.
Alrighty. So we're going to talk about the package, the application package, and the instructions. Next slide. So the application package, of course, is the guide into all the required components of the NAL ED application, and the vehicle to use is grants.gov. When you go to www.grants.gov, the ED grant opportunity number is provided for you. You can copy and paste that right into the search engine, and it will bring up that announcement. And the following information that you'll be seeing here is just kind of an abbreviation of what to expect. If you've never used grants.gov or any changes, it could have been a while since you've applied. So we're going to provide you with an overview of that, of those pieces. Next slide. So the application checklist, the electronic application submission checklist. So it's recommended that your application it be organized in the following manner and include the following parts in order to expedite that review process, right? Not only for us, but also for the peer reviewers who review your application. You want to make sure that it's easy to find and things are in the right place where they're supposed to be. When applying to grants.gov, via grants.gov, you need to ensure that that UEI number that you enter in the application is the same as that UEI number your organization used when it registered in that SAM, or the System for Award Management, at that time. So make sure that those UEIs match what you put in grants.gov. And so that part one, we're looking at preliminary documentation, and we're talking about the form SF424, and then the ED supplemental information, SF424. So refer to the instructions in the application package. There's a lot of them to try to give you as much as information possible. It's a lot, but it will help you in formulating developing your application. And just be sure to provide the correct and complete contact information for anybody who can answer questions. There have been times where we've had to do what we call clarifying calls to answer some questions that we really couldn't take out of the application. So make sure that's up to date, and that you use the correct entity type from the long drop-down list, because you don't want to erroneously put in an ineligible entity by accident. And here is the lovely budget information. This has been updated recently, so if you've used anything, double check that you're using the most recent, and you can tell in the upper right-hand corner, the expiration date is 2026. So make sure that you have the right form. You want to fill this out, and this is meant to capture every year of those budgets. So we should see a completed budget for year 1, year 2, and year 3. We didn't have one time somebody submit all their funding under year 1, and because that budget didn't change from year to year. They thought that's all they had to do. And that was problematic. So just make sure that you're completing each column for each year of the 3 years that you are applying to. And make sure that you're addressing the indirect cost rate information at the bottom of that form. Next slide. The budget also, do the entire form. Oh, and this is a very good tip. Make sure your figures, they make sense, and make sure that they match your budget narrative, because not only will the peer reviewers take a look at that, but we will, if you're selected, we'll be looking for that budget. And if they don't match, we're going to be looking at the ED 524 form for the final say. So you want to make sure that that is correct and matched. We know how grant applications go. You're passing them back and forth sometimes between several different departments and different offices. But you do want to make sure that final copy is clear and the numbers do match. And, the general rule of thumb is to consult the uniform guidance for applicable regulations. If you're not sure if it's allowable, go to the uniform guidance to check, because they have a whole bunch of information for you. And there's a nice little supplies versus equipment, taking a look at personal property from a supply standpoint. And for equipment, if you can't tell, I'm kind of speeding through because I want to make sure that we get through everything. But you can read these slides once they are posted in a little bit more detail for you. And here it is a little bit out of order, but we wanted to keep the budget narrative with the information, with the budget form. And so just making sure the requested fund, they require an itemized budget breakdown for every year of the project. So if you have salaries, if you have fringe benefits, you have travel, supplies, materials, subcontracts, consultants, indirect costs, all of those have to be spelled out. If you're traveling, you should be providing lodging, airfare as what you can best describe at this point in time. Okay, so we're going to be looking for detail on that. Complete anonymized budget breakdown and narrative for every year. The applicant should provide sufficient detail to let reviewers and project staff to understand, how those requested funds will be used and how much will be expended, and the relationship between what is requested and then what their project goals and activities and their outcomes. And the main rule of thumb, are the funds and costs allowable, allocable, and reasonable? Those are the 3 questions we ask when we review your budgets. So make sure you're keeping that in the back of your mind as you develop your application. And there's the link to the uniform guidance down below. Oops, next one. Abstract. So every project abstract is required and should not be longer than 2 double-spaced pages. And in that abstract, remember we talked about this at the very beginning, and some of the things to make sure you include, and they're nicely listed here, from the title, the institution, what eligibility you're applying under, what native language, the partners, which priorities, the competition, competitive preference priorities, and the absolute priorities, the project goals and description, any school data. One note that grants.gov may include a little notation that indicates that the project abstract may not exceed 1 page. However, that is not true. An abstract of more than 1 page may be uploaded, but we do ask that you keep it to double-spaced 2 pages for us with this information in there. Project narrative, we recommend a 30-page limit. Back in the day, we would deem applications ineligible if they went 1 page over that. That is not the case. You will not be disqualified if your application exceeds the recommended page limit, but we do recommend 30-page limit, mainly because if your peer reviewers, they have a lot of other applications to read. And if they're getting bogged down, and I've seen 100-page applications, it's difficult for them to discern and glean the information that they need to answer their selection criteria. And it's just difficult to maneuver. So we ask a recommended 30-page limit. And then some other following, just some general recommended guidelines on double space, font, and so forth to help you, that has been proven successful in the past. Other attachments required of all applicants. Applicant information provides information that must be provided in this area, such as the assurances that Alani alluded to in some of the application requirements. This is where you would put that. Resumes, this is where you would put that. And if there's any other information that you would like us to consider, I've seen maps, I've seen pictures, I've seen other things that can be PDF'd. You can put them into your other attachments here as well. And some of the things also, oops, I almost forgot about these. Oh my goodness. Consortium agreements, applicant engagement with any of the Indian tribes or tribal organizations. You can show your indirect cost rate agreement goes here. Any kind of documentation for the Indian organization. We talked about for CPP1, filling out the form. So these are all the types of things that can go under that Part 6. And then Alani, I'm going to turn it over for the next couple slides there. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, we're coming in. So we know that identifying exactly which additional documents you may need to provide can be a little bit challenging. So over the next few slides, we're going to walk through what each eligible entity needs to submit, and what are required to submit, and what documents may be optional. All right, so if the lead applicant is an Indian tribe, then you need to check out the memorandum of agreement. Any applicant that proposes to work with a partner to carry out the proposed project must include a signed and dated memorandum of agreement, signed again within the next 4 months. It should include, again, the partner, what they'll be doing, the timeline, the roles and responsibilities of each partner, particularly when it comes to data sharing, the roles and responsibilities of each partner when it comes to native language instructors being recruited, retained, and trained. Also, applicant engagement with Indian tribes and tribal organizations. All non-tribal applicants must engage with appropriate officials. Again, we've gone through this and talked about this. Tribal certification attachment, you need to make sure that you have that. That is applicants that are either, again, LEAs, including public charter schools, a school operated by the Bureau of Indian Education, or a non-tribal for-profit or nonprofit organization. You must make sure you complete that form. A request for competitive preference priority 1 attachment. Applicants that request this priority must complete this form, as well as documentation of Indian organization. Those applicants that are an Indian organization must provide adequate documentation to demonstrate that the organization meets each element of the definition. Sorry, my thing keeps moving. If you are a tribal college or university, these are the documents that you should make sure you have. Again, the general application requirements, attachment, and assurances, forms that are provided in the application package, the MOA, if a partner is involved, that is you're generating that and creating that. Again, I just went through all the different pieces of the MOA that you should include, as well as your competitive preference priority 1, any funding that you're receiving. That, again, is a form that's provided in the application. If you are a tribal education agency or a TEA, here are your requirements. Again, similar to the previous 2, general application requirement, attachments, and assurances. All those forms are part of your application package. The MOA, if a partner is involved, as well as competitive preference priority 1, Title 6 funding. Again, that form is provided in your application package. And I just want to, again, when you go back maybe through this or through your NIA, you want to make sure that you are getting all of the appropriate signatures if it's required by the appropriate person or position within your organization. As an Alaska Native Regional Corporation, again, very similar requirements. the general application requirements, attachment and assurances, the MOA if a partner is involved, as well as competitive preference priority number 1, Title VI funding. All these forms, again, are found in your application package. If you are a private, tribal, or Alaska Native nonprofit organization, again, very similar requirements, general application, MOA if a partner is involved, as well as the competitive preference priority number 1 on all the forms are found in your application. Now we're going to get to regarding part 6, documentation required of a non-tribal for-profit organization. And so this is some additional information that you do need to provide if you're a non-tribal for-profit organization. So you still need to provide the general application requirement, attachment, and assurances. You still need to are required to provide an MOA if a partner is involved in the meeting of the requirements of the grant. You have to show that you have engaged with tribal officials. That is, you are generating that can be in the form of either a letter of support, or maybe it's part of your MOA, and also maybe some other evidence of tribal consultation. Maybe there's agenda notes, some maybe summary of notes that come from that meeting and that engagement. You also need to do tribal certification. So that form is provided in your application. Again, make sure that it's signed by and dated by a tribal official. And then we have, again, competitive preference priority 1. If you are receiving Title VI funding, that form is provided, as well as competitive preference number 2, Indian preference. That both 5 and 6 are optional, but you really want to sort of make sure that you are checking, again, your application, your entity, and that you are providing all the information required to communicate your work and your who you're working with within tribal communities. If you are a school operated by the Bureau of Indian Education, again, the first 3 are very similar: the general application requirements, MOA, if a partner is involved, and applicant engagement with tribal officials. That is something you're going to generate. Again, it could be a letter of support or in your MOA, or any other evidence of maybe a tribal consultation. Tribal certification, again, a form that is provided in your application package. You want to make sure that you are having the tribal official sign and date that form. And then again, the 2 optional competitive preference priority 1, that form is provided, as well as competitive preference number 2, Indian preference, that is generated by your organization. And then if you are a public charter school that is an LEA under the state law, again, very similar requirements, general application, MOA if you have a partner that's involved, and application engagement with tribal officials. That, again, remember, is generated by yourself. Tribal certification, that form is provided in the application. And again, the last 2, 5 and 6, are optional. That 1, the competitive preference number 1 priority, competitive preference priority 1 is a form in your application, and competitive preference priority number 2 is generated by your organization. And I think I'm turning that over to you, Donna.
Yeah, I'm going to fly through some of these other things because we've kind of already touched on it. We talked about the other optional attachments and what to include there. Next slide. We talked about the CPP2 and the application that must be included in consortium agreement. And we reference again the CFR that you can look at for more information on consortium agreements. Part 7, next slide, is important. We do have assurances and certifications. We do screen for this when we screen for eligibility. You want to make sure all the pieces are there. So all of these forms, unless it says optional next to it, are required. Next slide, we do have a new GEPA section. And these next couple slides are just showing you, a matter of fact, go to the next slide, please. Updated GEPA. We, instead of the one question, we now have 4 more directed questions. So if you haven't done a grants.gov in a year or 2, this will be new. So make sure that you're completing that. And if not, next slide, for some reason, this is what an error message will give you if there's some kind of problem with that GEPA. And here, the next slide, we provide you with the links to the actual form, instructions, there's training, there's everything you can want and know about GEPA. Section 427 resources are available at your fingertips. And then a couple of application submission instructions. If you're new or haven't done this in a while, we do have some common instructions for the applicants, and the link is there to go, and it gives you all kinds of information on the common instructions for completing the application. Of course, no password protected files, and try to limit the size of the files. This translates into grants G6, which is our financial management, grant management program. And if it's super, super large, that may be problematic. So just try to be aware of your files. Make sure you do this early. If the closing date, which it is March 7th at 11:59 and 59 seconds, if it's midnight and 2 seconds after, it will be deemed ineligible. It does take time. If you need to get that UEA SAM registration, start it now. It takes a while to get. So register for that early. Next one, grants.gov submission problems. I am the competition manager. I would love to help you with your grants.gov problems, but I will not, because that is not me. So here are the contact pieces that you can anyway, mail, email, phone, portal. We give you everything you could possibly find to get to your grants.gov submission problems. I wish I could help you. General tips, again, read the NIA or NOFO, as it's often called. Read it. Everything is in there. Read that application package, those instructions before, during, and after. Make it easy for that reviewer to find those information, that selection criteria. Make it easy to understand the budget narrative and make sure it matches. Proofread. I had this happen last year. The right hand thought the left hand was submitting. The left hand thought the right hand was submitting, and they missed the complete deadline. It wasn't until the day after where they went, oh my gosh, we never got it in because it was in grants.gov, workspace. So make sure that you're communicating and working with other offices for your grant application. Next slide. Again, register early for SAM. And there's some information in the link for the user, that user guide that could be helpful. And we're almost there, guys. Screening eligibility. This is what we do. We get your application, we screen it. We will let you know of if you are deemed ineligible, and we'll send that to you by email. All eligible applications are going to be reviewed and passed on to that peer review panel. They will be independently read and scored based on those selection criteria. There will be panel discussions for each application that's being scored. Again, we're ranked order and then compressed review window to help the reviewers with, well, I'm not going to go into that. We don't need to go into that right now. I don't think it's going to be compressed. Resources, as they've been saying in the chat over and over, the resources will be on the web. This recording, the slide deck, and next Tuesday, we have another one, I think at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Same information. If you had questions on that Head Start Early Learning, we will get back to you if you provided us an email in your registration link. If not, you can throw it in the chat or send it to us. And any of those Head Start questions, we'll try to get back to you before then. Deadline, write it in your log, put it on your phone. It's 11:59 and 59 seconds Eastern time. And any questions, I can't help you with your application. I really wish I could, but I can't. I'm just going to refer you back to the NOFO if you ask me on what you should write. However, if you have questions about the process, if you have questions about the NIA, feel free to email me at this address, and I will be happy to answer whatever I can. I just can't help you write the proposal. Okay. Phew. Sorry, we were
That was
that was
running.
quick.
Yeah, that went by fast, lots of information. So we really thank you for joining again. I see in the chat, as soon as we get the recording processed, minus any technical glitches, we will post that at the OIE website. So please go ahead and check that out, as well as the slide deck will be there.